Alright, guys, here we go. I think this is segment 4, I want to say. If I'm wrong, sue me.
Don't spread the rumor throughout the world that Negroes are kept in ignorance because of prejudiced white people and all of that propaganda. Because that type of propaganda is the brainchild of the communists. And they want to use the Negro to gain foothold in those parts of the world where the darker races exist. I don't give a tinker's damn about a Negro. There are certain people who are using the Negro in order to establish that power in Washington. And the Negro is just merely a pawn in a game that's bigger than he is.
Trigger warning.
Black people were always ripe for use by the communists because many of us do come from situations of poverty.
I'm going to be praying for you. I'm going to be coming back to see you. And we are going to be demanding when we go to Washington that something be done and done immediately about these conditions.
We can resonate with the theory that there's someone out there that's responsible for our condition.
I am the mother with six children. I live on a plantation in an old piece of house. And my husband works on the plantation. He don't make, but man give him just $8 a day. And I don't have a job, and it's hard for him to make a job with $8 a day and nothing else to go up against. I got one son stopped school because I didn't have the money to buy him fish and clothing he needed to wear, and he just dropped out of school. And part of the time, I don't even know where I'm going to get the next meal for my children.
Many Negroes, by the thousands and millions, have been left bootless as a result of all of these years of oppression and as a result of a society that deliberately made his color a stigma and something worthless and degrading.
It's taking the economic Marxism of Karl Marx and applying it to race relations in a way that whites are the oppressors and minorities, non-whites, they are the oppressed.
We have to recognize who our major enemy is. The major enemy is not your brother, flesh of your flesh and blood of your blood. The major enemy is the hunky and his institutions of racism. That's the major enemy. And whenever anybody prepares for revolutionary warfare, you concentrate on the major enemy. We're not strong enough to fight.
As early as 19...
Hate is hate is hate. It is exactly as bad no matter who's doing it. Racism is racism is racism. Racial slurs is racial slurs is racial slurs. We can't even seem to agree on that, just the most basic of humanity.
In 1928, the communists declared that the racial differences among our people constituted the weakest and most vulnerable point in our social fabric. By constantly probing and straining at this one spot, they calculated that eventually the cloth could be torn apart and that Americans could be divided, weakened, and perhaps even set against each other in open combat.
They were right.
Charles, you want to eliminate whiteness. Is that true?
I want to destroy whiteness, to be more specific, yes.
And what is whiteness, and why do you want to destroy it?
So whiteness is an ideological construct, right? It's an ideology, it's a set of behaviors and beliefs and practices that not only normalize the white way of seeing the world, but the white way of doing society. And so that structure has proven to be violent towards people of color, because it's the norm and standard by which we are judged, which is an inaccurate one. And so I think that needs to be destroyed in order for the liberation of people of color from white supremacy to take place.
I'm going to say it. Imagine if this was a white guy up there saying the exact same words just about another race. And it is a fair comparison, because it's not right when he does it either.
To be sure, that is not to conflate whiteness with white people, although all white people do benefit from whiteness, and there are people of color and black folks as well who adopt ideological positions that are consistent with white supremacy. And again, that is a disappointment, and it disenfranchises and harms people of color. So I think that ideology and that philosophy needs to be destroyed.
Trigger warning incoming. Jesse Lee Peterson can trigger people like nobody. Huh. This is actual learning, getting in books and reading, kids.
What we're covering is a very layered thing. We're talking about over a century of tactics, writings, education, journalism, music, film, all these different vehicles being used to carry out this ideology.
Many of our people's minds have been whitewashed. If a Negro comes up to you and you turn your back on him, he's got to run to the hunky. We're going to take time and patience with our people because they're ours. They're ours.
It's very clear. There was an intention to use black people
Rotten, fascist, racist,
to be a constant annoyance,
fuck you, fuck you, fuck you.
a thorn in the side to America.
Every black person out here, fuck all y'all.
What would possess somebody to behave like this and think you could look good, you look cool out there, by any stretch of the imagination?
To affect change.
In the summer of 1964, widespread rioting and looting suddenly broke out in Harlem, Rochester, Newark, Jersey City, Philadelphia, Cleveland, and Chicago, all within a few days of each other. It was as though an unseen hand had given the signal.
As a Jew, I have a certain amount of, shall we say, congenital social
Solinsky.
inside of me.
Bad guy.
My people have been pushed around, well, you know, from the beginning of time.
Buffalo.
Oh, longtime friend of Bill Ayers and lots of connections there with Obama.
New York, riots break out.
I want to make it crystal clear that as mayor that we will not tolerate a violation of the law. We will not tolerate criminal activity. We will not tolerate looting and pillaging.
Power has always gone into two areas, those who have money and those who have people. We have nothing but people. And the politicians understand this.
After 4 nights of violence and $100,000 damage, the mayor promises to do something about employment opportunities within a week, if they will cool off.
We were only in there for about a month and a half when Buffalo blew. We weren't even organized.
You get what's happening, right? All these riots that happened back in the day that people were thinking it was for a certain cause and all this and that. Solinsky is bragging about having instigated them and caused them, and it's to destroy America from the inside out.
And even our...
His name is Saul Alinsky, and there are still many to whom the name is meaningless. But to millions now, he is looked on as a savior. And these are the so-called have-nots, the culturally deprived, the abject poor.
If you think that mofo will give anybody anything besides himself, you're seriously deluding yourself.
Saul Alinsky is the father of community organizing and the progressivism that you see manifested across America.
People do not get power except when they
This
take
is the side you're really on.
or when they're strong enough so that the other side gives it up.
He was a Marxist, but he was very practical.
If you force an issue over too long a period, you're going to run into some real troubles. Let me tell you one of...
And he was into tactics.
You tell them that the next time we meet, we'll meet in front of the United States Senate in the hearings room, and they'll come there because they won't get an invitation. They'll be coming in response to a subpoena.
He wrote a very famous book called Rules for Radicals.
It is, without a doubt, the strategic playbook, as well as the Communist Manifesto of Karl Marx and Frederick Engels. Those are the two seminary documents for the progressive socialist left in America today.
What you find when you read these people,
And they're not even hiding it anymore. They're flat out saying, yeah, Marxism, blah, blah, blah. All this shit's good. Socialism, Marxism, communism. Idiots are actually saying the quiet part out loud now.
when you really study them, is that it's nothing for them to be deceitful and to be manipulative and to lie in order to get their ideas to come to pass.
The real question has never been a silly one about the end justifying the means. It's always been, does this particular end justify this particular means?
His dedication tells you everything. He dedicated his book to Lucifer.
As being the first revolutionary to be able to establish his own kingdom.
Now everybody understands what white power is because they own the banks. They have all the commercial power in the community. But they only have it at the expense.
This is from the Canadian documentary that was done on Saul Alinsky, Organizing for Power, the Alinsky Approach.
The Alinsky organization is often invited into a community by its churchmen. Franklin Delano Roosevelt Florence, a minister of the Church of Christ, is elected president of the organization, which names itself FIGHT, Freedom, Independence, God, Honor, Today. In its first year, FIGHT achieves modest victories against the city administration in the area of urban renewal and attacks anyone who doesn't offer uncritical support.
All these different movements that were popping up in industrial cities in the 60s and 70s.
We're sick and tired of this Uncle Tom leadership. That's why we have bills here.
People thought that these were black organizations, ran by black people, for the uplift of black people. People genuinely thought that.
I want to comment about the outside agitators that the mayor claims is coming into Buffalo to create the disorder.
What these short films of Saul Alinsky showed is that it was actually white Marxists.
Alinsky sent in Dick Harmon as staff director.
Once I give the word to go, we're off. There will be no turning back.
Alinsky sends in Ed Chambers, his top organizer. Chambers works quickly to set up the local organization in time to avoid another summer of violence.
Every organization that we build is built on a multi-issue basis. The worst thing you can do, and one of the reasons why some of the civil rights or a large part of the civil rights movement went dead, is to organize around a single issue. It becomes a straitjacket.
Number one, chronic unemployment of adults and teenagers. Number two, inferior education. Number three, your slumlord. Number four, police brutality. Number five, the lack of recreation facilities. There's one swimming pool to every 50,000 Negroes, and there are...
Take a single issue, and you literally lock out a large part of potential membership who may be sympathetic to the...
It was very surprising to find this footage because it puts his words out there. It puts the strategy out there that communists and Marxists and socialists, whatever you want to call them, that they've been putting into practice for a very long time.
The beautiful execution of power.
You had these black pastors taking marching orders.
One spokesman is always selected.
May I have your attention, please? We're going to the mayor's office and then to the Chamber of Commerce. I'm Reverend Fletcher Grimes, who will be the spokesman. I am the spokesman, one spokesman for the organization. A week ago,
He is told that he's got to have a specific question and stay with it.
his specific requests in regard to jobs in the face of a crisis in job inequities in the Negro community. Some 916 jobs appear to be available. That includes the 600 jobs that the county is making available.
Never let the mayor get off of it.
But then you're saying that they have not delivered at this point. And the second point, I'd like to... No, you're saying it. I'm not saying
This
it.
is one thing in terms of tactics. You sit with a political leader and you say, this is the question.
Are these jobs of a temporary or permanent nature? I haven't got the full specifics on them. Some of them will be...
You don't hear him. Do you recognize us or don't you?
Well, let me at this time, Mr. Mayor,
Sound
make
familiar.
crystal clear Bill's position on this job matter.
To the extent that we have black pastors involved.
Minister Florence, were you successful in getting the Kodak stockholders list?
These were just black frontmen.
They denied us the right to say it again. Same racist tactic.
Saul Alinsky is very strategic in what he's doing.
Minister Florence interrupted him, calling for a point of order.
He's very calculated in his approach to organize people and to affect change. It made me think about Black Lives Matter, because Black Lives Matter is a modern organization.
The reality is that race in the United States operates on a spectrum from black to white.
The prevailing narrative is that 3 black women who are concerned about black people, who love black people, these are the women who started Black Lives Matter, and that it's a black movement, and every white person associated with it is merely an ally.
It is a tool for our allies to show up differently for us.
I was wondering, is there a white Marxist behind Black Lives Matter?
Displacement, genocide, and climate crimes. Is that a laundry list or a web of connected crises? Our next guest has been helping people's movements make the links for decades now. He's Eric Mann of the Labor Community Strategy Center right here in Los Angeles. How did you get started?
Well, I come out of a Jewish socialist.
What I found is Eric Mann.
I've been organizing with the Congress of Racial Equality, Students for Democratic Society, worked with the Black Panther Party, was in SDS, was a weatherman, went to prison for political issues.
When you look into Eric Mann, you look at what he believes and what he wants.
Free the U.S. 2 million prisoners, 100,000 less police, free, safe, and legal abortion with public support and financing, and minors having the right